Welcome to the Writing 1 presentation on periodicals and scholarly sources. Please follow along with this presentation by looking in your books. How to Write Anything books should be chapter 38. And look in the Pocket Style Manual at pages 96 through 98, please. As you start learning about research, you're going to encounter this term periodicals, so I want to make sure you know what that means. It basically refers to any type of publication that comes out periodically. So a day is a period, a week is a period, a month is a period, quarterly, yearly, things like that. So here we're going to be dealing with magazines, we're going to be dealing with newspapers, and we're going to be dealing with journals. Obviously the web has changed some of the way that we think about this, because now magazines and newspapers and things can publish things not just daily, weekly, but even, they can provide updates and newer versions of articles fairly regularly. So we're starting to see some blurring on how this is defined, but we can still say this is a general category that includes things like magazines, newspapers, and journals. As we talk about different types of sources, it's important for you to think about the editorial process that goes into those different sources. We just talked about periodicals, and a couple of types of periodicals are magazines and newspapers. As you can see on the screen, I made a little graphic there. The articles usually are first written by the author, then they're reviewed by one or more editors, and many magazines and newspapers also use fact checkers. Those are starting to get a little bit out of vogue now that people use more online sources that are a lot quicker to access, and so many editors also do the fact checking job. But that's a general editorial process. There's an author, then there's one or more editors, and then they pass it along to the general public, readers like you and me, again either in print or online. Another type of periodical that maybe you had never heard of before this class is the scholarly or academic journals. However, you're going to be doing a lot of work with these in this class, so let's spend some time discussing them. Usually these are journals published by universities. Occasionally they have other sources, but usually they're published by universities, and they usually include articles by people who are specialists and researchers and professors in particular fields. Some of them are very broad. Some of them deal with very narrow subject contents, and maybe they come out every quarter, so maybe every 3 to 4 months. Sometimes they come out twice a year, once a year. But usually there's a longer process involved than what we just looked at for magazines or newspapers. So let's look at that process. It's called the peer review process. Some books, including some of the books that we use for this class, call it the refereed process. So in case you bump into that, that's what that means. Let's look at that peer review process. You see on the screen, I have that graphic there with the author. The author writes the article, and then it's sent along to an editor. And that editor will look it over and decide yes or no, I think this has some potential. And then the editor will send it out to peer reviewers. And this is a really important concept. Peer reviewers are going to be other scholars in the field. So the author himself or herself is going to be a scholar, a researcher, a professor within a certain field. And then the editor is going to send that out to different peer reviewers who are also scholars, professionals, professors, experts in that same field. They're going to look it over and review it, and they're going to not just fact check it, but look at the research that was done. If they think it was quality research, whether they agree with it or not, was it worthwhile research? Did the person cite the sources and do a worthwhile job on it? They're going to look it all over, and then they're going to send back some feedback, some information, some ideas on ways that it could be better. They're going to send that back to the editor. Oftentimes peer reviewers are not known to the authors, and oftentimes the articles are sent without the peer reviewers even knowing specifically who the author is, because once in a while there are some personal preferences and we don't want that to get in the way. So the peer reviewers send the information, the feedback back to the editor, who then sends it back to the author, and the author revises, reviews, keeps working on the journal article. And eventually the journal article gets done and gets put into a scholarly journal. And the people who read that are generally scholars, readers like you and me, people who are within what we would call academia, who are in the college and research fields. You're not going to usually find scholarly journals out in the checkout line at the grocery store. You're not even going to find very many scholarly journals in a public library, at least not in a place like Plymouth. Maybe some of the bigger cities, they would have more of those. You're mostly going to find scholarly journals either at the university libraries or in research like lab type libraries, or again, we're going to look at some places online where you can find that information as well. So we can see here that the peer review process is very rigorous. And the result of the peer review process is that you know that the credibility for the article is really high. You know you can trust the results. You may not be able to agree with them, and there are lots of disagreements even within scholars in the same field. They're constantly having arguments and discussions on what the best ideas are. And that's part of the great field that we work in and study in, all of us. And we can see that as very rigorous, though. And as a result, the end product is something that we can trust to put in our papers. We don't have to worry if we're getting good information or not. And that's why often with your papers for a college level course, you're required to at least have some sources from scholarly academic journal articles. When you're looking for these great sources, then, you want to know where to look. And you can look in periodical databases, and your Ancilla College library offers access to several major databases. The library actually provides an excellent tutorial on how to use the EBSCOhost database. Those lessons and other information on searching the databases are in the presentation, Digging into Databases, Your Best Research Source. And you'll want to look through that, and we'll also have some exercises to help you solidify and practice that information.